Have you ever remembered a song from your childhood and felt a sudden cold dread wash over you for no reason at all? You call it nostalgia, a harmless ghost from your past. You make the assumption that the memory is yours alone. But that's a comfortable lie, a story your consciousness tells itself to feel safe. The truth is, some memories aren't memories. They are rules. Rules to a game you forgot you were playing. And some songs are the whistle that starts the next round. By the end of this story, you will understand. You'll understand that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a monster in the dark. It's the simple, catchy tune stuck in your own mind, patiently waiting for you to hum it back. You know that one friendship? The one that feels less like a choice and more like a fact of nature, an assumption your soul made long before you even met. For me, that was Max and Annie. We were a product of Cabin 3, Camp Grinlow. That place, it wasn't just wood and nails and a leaky roof. It was a state, a pocket of reality where the outside world just faded. Every summer felt like stepping into a shared consciousness, a secret only we knew. We didn't just make memories there. We built the very foundation of who we were. The I am for each of us was forged in the heat of those campfires, in the whispered secrets after lights out. The camp itself didn't last, of course. It shut down for good the very next year, the gates chained with a finality that felt almost violent. But it didn't matter. The work had been done. We were already tethered, the three of us. The place was gone, but the feeling remained. But that's only the surface. The real magic, the real connection, was woven in the quiet moments. It was in the way Annie could finish my sentences, or how Max knew, just by the look in my eyes, that I needed to skip arts and crafts and go skim stones at the lake instead. We constructed an entire inner world within the grounds of that camp. It had its own rules, its own language. It was our sanctuary, our proving ground. The closure of the camp felt like a violation of that sacred space, a door slammed shut on, a vital part of ourselves. We heard rumors, of course. Financial trouble, a tragic accident the season before we arrived, the kind of ghost stories adults tell to justify shutting down a piece of childhood. We never believed them. To us, the camp wasn't a business that could fail. It was an entity. And its sudden death left a silence that none of us knew how to fill, a question hanging in the air for years to come. Now go deeper. Think about the energy that holds a bond like that together across time and distance. For us, the feeling is the key. It was the entire principle. After Grinlow, life did what it does. It pulled us in different directions. High school, college, jobs. The letters turned into emails, the emails into sporadic texts and late-night calls. But the connection never wavered. It was a constant, an unspoken assumption we all carried. We are a unit. It was this deep, resonant feeling, a hum beneath the noise of our separate lives. We could go months without talking, then pick up the phone and it was as if we were still sitting on the damp porch of Cabin 3, swatting away mosquitoes and mapping out our futures. We were tapping into that same state, that shared world we built. It was always there, waiting for us, a place of absolute trust and belonging. This connection wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate selection, though it didn't feel like it at the time. It felt like breathing. You don't choose to breathe, you just do. Looking back, I see the operant power in it. In a sea of summer camp faces, we found each other with a certainty that borders on the supernatural. It was a silent agreement, a recognition. The universe seemed to whisper, "These are your people." We didn't need to work to become a perfect trio. In a way, we already were. That last summer, we made a promise, right by the fire pit, that we'd return one day. Not to the camp necessarily, but to us, to the feeling. A promise to always find our way back to that state of perfect, uncomplicated unity, no matter how complicated the world outside became. It was a promise sealed with a youthful certainty that we were invincible together. But a promise is just a story you tell the future. And nostalgia is a liar. It smooths over the rough edges, erases the splinters, and quiets the strange noises in the woods. Our memory of Camp Grinlow was a masterpiece of imagination, a carefully curated gallery of golden moments. We remembered the laughter, the triumphs, the endless sun. We forgot the shadows that danced just at the edge of the firelight. We forgot the feeling of being watched from the dense, dark woods. We forgot the little games and the strange rules that felt so important at the time. Our shared history was a beautiful, polished thing, and we were about to learn that revisiting the past doesn't just mean walking on old ground. It means waking up everything you left sleeping there. Here's what changes everything. It was Max, of course. He was always the digger, the one who couldn't leave a stone unturned. He sent the link to our group chat on a Tuesday afternoon. No caption, just the cold blue hyperlink. It was drone footage. Someone, some urban explorer with a taste for forgotten places, had flown a camera over the decaying corpse of Camp Grinlow, and you watch it, you see it, and your stomach just drops. The footage was brutally honest, a high-definition violation of our most sacred memories. The camera glides over the splintered sign, the letters of Grinlow peeling away like sunburnt skin. It pans across the mess hall, its roof caved in, a gaping mouth open to the sky. This wasn't our camp. This was a grave. The crisp, unforgiving clarity of the video was a direct assault on the soft focus perfection of our shared imagination. It was reality, showing up uninvited to the door of our inner world, and it was telling us that the place we loved was well and truly gone. But it was the shot of Cabin 3 that broke something. The drone hovered over it, our home, and you could see the back wall had completely collapsed. The bunks we slept in were exposed to the elements, rotting, covered in moss and filth. It was an image of utter ruin. And then Annie's text came through. It wasn't angry or disgusted. It was just sad. "I hate this," she wrote. "I just wish we could see it how it was. Just one more time." And right there, in that simple, impossible wish, you could feel the immense weight of the past. She wasn't talking about the wood and the nails. She was mourning a state of being, a feeling that seemed as lost as the physical place itself. The drone footage proved that you can't go back. But Annie's words, they revealed a desperate, human need to believe that you can. It was a longing for a state of consciousness that we thought was gone forever. Max, ever the fixer, responded almost immediately. And you know the feeling, don't you? When an idea is born from a place of love, but is so deeply, fundamentally flawed. "What if we did?" he texted. "What if we just go?" The words hung there in the chat, glowing on the screen. He wasn't just typing a suggestion. He was trying to exercise a kind of power, his own operant power against a harsh reality. He was trying to will a new possibility into existence. "For one night," he added, "like we used to. We bring some marshmallows, a speaker. We can make it ours again." It was insane. It was trespassing. It was dangerous. But it was also perfect. It was a direct challenge to the decay we just witnessed. It was an assumption of the highest order. The assumption that our presence, our collective energy, could somehow overwrite the ruin and resurrect the spirit of the place. There's a moment, right before a terrible decision is made, where a silence hangs in the air. A tiny window where your intuition screams at you to stop, to turn back. You could feel that silence in the space between our texts. The logical part of me saw the collapsing roofs, the tetanus waiting in every rusty nail. But the other part, the part that still lived in that inner world we'd built, felt the pull. Annie replied with a single word. "Really?" And in that word was all the hope and all the fear. The selection was being made. We were choosing to believe that our bond was more real than rotting wood and overgrown trails. We were choosing to believe that feeling is the key, that if we could just feel it again, the place itself wouldn't matter. I typed "I'm in" before. I could second guess it. The decision was unanimous. The pact was sealed. And just like that, the dread was replaced by a strange, frantic excitement. We were not just planning a camping trip. We were orchestrating a pilgrimage. We were going back to the source. The drone footage became irrelevant, a ghost we chose to ignore. We replaced it with our own curated images, our own powerful imagination of what the night would be. We'd build a fire in the old pit. We'd tell the old stories. We'd play the old songs. We would, for one night, exist in that perfect state again. We were so focused on resurrecting the past, so sure of our power to do so. We never stopped to ask what else we might be resurrecting with it. But you can't just visit the past without consequences. The past visits you back, and it doesn't always knock. The final stretch of road leading to Grinlow was barely a road anymore. Annie and I fell silent as my car groaned over deep ruts and tangled roots, the overgrown branches of pine trees scraping against the windows like fingernails. You could feel a shift in the air, a drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the setting sun. The very consciousness of the place felt different, hostile even. When we finally saw the camp sign, or what was left of it, we just stared. It was splintered and leaning, half swallowed by a thick curtain of ivy. This was the first test, the first moment our bright, polished assumption collided with a grim and decaying reality. The gate hung open on a single rusty hinge, not as an invitation, but like a jaw hanging slack. We had imagined a bittersweet homecoming. What we found felt like arriving at a crime scene long after the body has been taken away. Getting out of the car, the silence was the first thing that hit you. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of soundlessness. The air smelled of damp earth, of rot and forgotten things. The cheerful chaos of a summer camp had been replaced by the unnerving stillness of a place that nature was violently reclaiming. We took a few hesitant steps past the gate, and the scale of the decay was overwhelming. This wasn't the gentle neglect we'd seen in the video. This felt intentional. The woods seemed darker, denser, pressing in on the clearing from all sides, eager to swallow what little remained. Our inner world, the one we so confidently thought we could resurrect here, felt like a child's fantasy in the face of this oppressive reality. The I am that had been born here now felt alien, a stranger in its own home. I glanced at Annie, and the hopeful excitement she'd shown in our texts was gone, replaced by a pale, wide-eyed apprehension. She was hugging herself, a small gesture, to ward off a chill that ran deeper than the evening air. "This was a mistake," she whispered, and her voice was so quiet I barely heard it. And in that moment, I agreed. Every instinct was screaming at us to get back in the car and leave this place to its ghosts. Our assumption that we could simply walk back into a cherished state of being was collapsing around us, as surely as the roofs of the cabins. We came seeking comfort in the past, but the atmosphere here offered only one thing, a profound and unsettling sense of dread. It felt like we were trespassing on something's private grief, and it did not want us here. We were two kids, suddenly very small and very far from home. Just as the silence threatened to swallow us whole, a pair of headlights sliced through. The dusk and the familiar rumble of Max's truck filled the void. He pulled up beside us, killing the engine but leaving the lights on, casting us in a stark, theatrical glow. The driver's side door flew open, and a blast of some upbeat, forgotten 90s rock song hit us from his speaker. "Well," he said, kicking a rotten piece of fence post with a grin, "looks like the decorating committee has really let the place go." He was holding a bag of chips in one hand and a six-pack of soda in the other. He was a whirlwind of defiant, manufactured energy, a desperate attempt to use his own operant power to beat back the gloom. He was trying to force our old state of being onto this new, terrifying place through sheer force of will. And for a moment, you know what? It worked. His laughter, though it sounded a little too loud in the dead air, was infectious. Annie managed a weak smile. I felt some of the tension in my shoulders release. Together, the three of us, our little unit, felt stronger. Max's presence was a shield, a reinforcement of the shared imagination we came here to find. He clapped, us both on the back. "Come on," he said, his voice full of a confidence none of us truly felt. "The royal suite at the fire pit awaits." We followed him, our path lit by his phone's flashlight, a tiny beam of defiance in the encroaching darkness. We were making the selection to push forward, to ignore the blaring warning signs. But a bubble of false confidence is a fragile thing, and we were walking deeper into the heart of the camp, where sharper things than memory were waiting. The fire pit was the one thing that had defied the decay. It stood in the center of the main clearing, a perfect circle of stones, as if a groundskeeper had just swept it clean that morning. It was a strange, solitary island of order in an ocean of chaos. Max, in his element, had a fire crackling in minutes. The flames leaped up, pushing back the oppressive darkness, painting our faces in a flickering, warm light. For the first time since we arrived, it felt like we were succeeding. This small circle of light became the new center of our inner world, a fortress against the encroaching dread. We broke out the marshmallows, and the familiar sticky sweet smell of them toasting was a powerful comfort. We were actively imposing our desired state, our fragile bubble of nostalgia, onto this broken place. And for a while, huddled by the heat, it felt real. The forest and its heavy silence seemed to retreat to a safe distance. The warmth and the sugar worked their magic, and the conversation flowed easily. We fell back into our old rhythms, the stories and in-jokes that formed the private language of our friendship. We talked about Counselor Dave and his terrible guitar playing, about the inedible mystery meat they served on Thursdays, about the time Annie capsized her canoe on purpose to get out of a race. We were rebuilding our world, memory by memory, reinforcing our shared imagination against the evidence of our eyes. Max was holding court, of course, recounting his legendary capture-the-flag victory with dramatic flair. We were all laughing, lost in the performance. It was a conscious selection of memories, a deliberate choice to inhabit only the brightest, sunniest corners of our past. We were chasing a feeling, and for a few precious moments, it felt like we had caught it. Then, Annie's face lit up in a different way. "Oh my God," she said, her voice filled with a sudden pure nostalgia. "Do you guys remember Statues and Songs?" The name hung in the air, instantly familiar. It was our camp's own strange version of Red Light, Green Light, a game played only after dark. The rules came rushing back to us in a flood. One person, the Whistler, would stand by the fire pit, close their eyes, and whistle the camp's official song, a simple four-note tune that was played on the bugle every morning. The rest of us, the statues, would start at the edge of the tree line. As long as the Whistler was whistling, you could run, sneak, or crawl towards them. But the second the whistling stopped, you had to freeze in place instantly. The Whistler would open their eyes, and if they caught even a twitch, you were out. The winner was the first to make it to the fire pit and touch the Whistler. We all laughed, remembering. "You were the worst cheat at that," Annie said, pointing a gooey marshmallow at Max. "You'd whistle for like half a second just to catch us off guard." But as we talked, the other, more specific rules started to surface from the depths of our memory, and they didn't seem as funny now. I remembered that you weren't allowed to make a sound the entire time, not even if you tripped. Absolute silence. Max remembered another one. You couldn't have a flashlight. You had to run in the dark, using only the fire as your guide. The strangest rule, the one we had always followed without question, was that once you started a game, you had to finish it. No quitting halfway through, no matter what. Spoken aloud in this dead, silent place, the rules felt less like a game and more like a ritual. The assumption that this was all just harmless fun began to feel terrifyingly naive. Our laughter died down, replaced by a thoughtful silence. The fire crackled, spitting embers into the darkness. We had reenacted the camp in our minds, told the stories, and now we had invoked its most peculiar ritual. Words have an operant power you don't always understand. You speak things into being. By remembering the game in such detail, in its own sacred space, we had unknowingly opened a door. The comfort of the fire felt thin again. The darkness at our backs seemed to lean in closer, listening. We were just three friends, telling stories. But some stories are like keys, and some locks should never be opened. That's when the sound started. A quiet, impossibly clear whistling, drifting out from the blackness of the trees. It was the camp song, the first four notes, played with perfect pitch. You know how a sound can change a room. This sound changed the world. It wasn't just a whistle. It was a needle scratching across the vinyl of our comfortable nostalgia. The four notes were impossibly clear, melodic, and utterly devoid of any human warmth. They seemed to materialize in the air around us, a sound without a source. My head snapped towards Max, my heart hammering against my ribs. It had to be him. It was his kind of joke, a perfect cruel little prank to cap off the spooky atmosphere. But the look on his face, it wasn't triumph. It was the same stone-cold confusion that was churning in my own gut. His eyes darted to Annie, who was already shaking her head, her face a pale mask in the firelight. The simple logical assumption that this was a prank evaporated in an instant, leaving behind the cold, hard vacuum of an impossible truth. We were not alone. "All right, Max, you got us." "Very funny," I said, but the words felt thin, fragile. My voice didn't sound like my own. He held up his hands, his eyes wide. "I swear to you, that wasn't me." And then it came again. The same four notes. Wee, wee, woo, wheat. But this time, it was closer. Not physically closer, you understand. There were no rustling leaves, no snapping twigs. The sound simply felt more present, more insistent. It was a violation, an invasion of our carefully constructed inner world. The fire, which had been our fortress, now felt like a spotlight, exposing us in the center of a vast, dark arena. The consciousness of this place was no longer dormant. It was awake, it was aware of us, and it was speaking its own language. The childish feeling of being watched had matured in a heartbeat into the adult terror of being hunted. Here's what changes everything. A sound needs a source. A whistle needs lungs, lips, air. But this felt different. This was like the woods themselves had drawn a breath and exhaled a perfect, patient melody. It was a phenomenon, a tear, in the fabric of what was supposed to be real. And in that moment, you understand that your entire life has been lived with the assumption that reality has rules. People can't just appear out of thin air, and sounds don't just happen. But here, in the decaying heart of Camp Grinlow, the rules were different. We had stumbled into a place where the barrier between imagination and reality was not just thin, it was non-existent. The game we had been reminiscing about suddenly felt like an instruction manual we had foolishly read aloud. An incantation that had summoned something ancient and playful and utterly malign. Fear is a strange engine. In Annie and me, it created paralysis, but in Max, it ignited a reckless, terrifying defiance. He scrambled to his feet, his fists clenched, and stared out into the pitch blackness beyond the fire. "Okay," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You want to play? Is that it?" The whistling stopped. The silence that rushed in was somehow worse, heavier. "Max, stop it," Annie begged, her voice a ragged whisper. But he was beyond reason. He was making a desperate selection, choosing confrontation over fear. He was trying to exert his own operant power over a situation that was hopelessly, terrifyingly out of his control. "Fine," he shouted again into the oppressive dark. We'll play your stupid game." He turned back to us, his face manic in the firelight. "It's what it wants," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "It's a game. We just have to play. I'll be the whistler." It was the single worst idea I had ever heard in my life, a decision born of pure, distilled terror. We were agreeing to the terms of a contract we didn't understand, with an entity we couldn't see. My mind was screaming no, but my body was frozen. Doing something felt less terrifying than waiting in that crushing silence. So we nodded, a slow, fatalistic agreement. I felt Annie take my hand, her grip like ice. We stood up and began walking backward away from the fire, toward the black, waiting maw of the tree line. As we reached the edge of the darkness, the whistling from the woods stopped, and in the sudden, absolute silence, Max closed his eyes. The game was about to begin. Max squeezed his eyes shut. His whistle was a shaky human thing, a pathetic imitation of the sound from the woods. But it was the starting pistol. Annie and I surged forward from the tree line, our movements clumsy with terror. Running in near total darkness is a primal fear. Every root is a hand reaching for your ankle, every branch a claw swiping at your face. The fire, our goal, seemed 1,000,000 miles away, a distant, mocking star. Max stopped whistling. We froze, our bodies screaming with momentum. My lungs burned. The silence was absolute and you could feel it, the cold, analytical attention of the true whistler, judging our every muscle twitch. This wasn't a game. This was an audition for survival, and we didn't know the criteria. This new state, this horrifying reality was all that existed. The world outside of this clearing was gone. He whistled again, longer this time. We ran, a desperate, stumbling charge. We were getting closer, maybe halfway there. I could see the sweat on Max's face, a sheen of terrified concentration. Then he did it. The old habit, the muscle memory from 1,000 childhood games. He cut the whistle short, the way he always did to cheat, to catch us off balance. It worked. I stumbled, windmilling my arms to stay upright. Annie, who was right beside me, wasn't as lucky. She pitched forward. In that split second of chaos, I saw Max's hands fly up, not to help, but to steady himself. He shoved her. It wasn't malicious, just a pure, selfish reflex. Annie went down hard with a muffled cry, and in that exact instant, all sound ceased. Not just Max's whistle. Everything. The fire stopped crackling. The wind died. A deep, profound silence fell over the clearing. A rule had been broken, and what happened next will be burned into my consciousness for as long as I live. Annie didn't get up. She didn't cry out in pain. Her body, lying there on the damp earth, began to convulse. But it wasn't a seizure. It was a deconstruction. Her limbs, they bent backwards. Her spine arched at an impossible angle. A series of wet, snapping sounds, like a bundle of thick sticks being broken one by one, echoed in the dead silence. It was the full, terrifying demonstration of the entity's operant power. An unseen, unstoppable force was twisting her, breaking her, rearranging her from the inside out. Her eyes were wide, staring at me, but there was no recognition in them, only a silent, screaming horror. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. She lay still, a broken puppet on the forest floor. The game was real. Max stood frozen, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning, soul-crushing guilt. Annie, he whispered, the name a broken thing in his mouth. The truth hit him, hit us both. His stupid, playful cheat, his panicked shove. It had killed her. The weight of that knowledge was too much to bear. The game, the rules, the unseen player, none of it mattered anymore. Only the crushing reality of what he had just done. No, he whimpered. No, I didn't. He turned, his body shaking uncontrollably. He broke the first rule of being a statue. He moved. Then he broke the most important one. He quit. With a final choked sob of, "I'm sorry," he bolted, not towards the safety of the trees, but across the clearing, trying to flee the game itself. He ran right for the stone circle of the fire pit. His foot had barely touched the boundary stone when it happened. The invisible force took him. He was lifted off his feet as if by a giant, unseen hand. He didn't even have time to scream. His body was twisted in the air, a grotesque, instantaneous corkscrew of flesh and bone. The same sickening symphony of snaps and cracks filled the air, louder this time, more violent. For a horrifying second, he was suspended there, a mangled sculpture of his own terror, before being unceremoniously dropped like a bag of trash onto the stones. He was gone. The brutal logic of the situation crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. These weren't accidents, they were penalties, punishments for breaking the rules. Feeling is the key, and the only feeling now was a cold, sharp, clarifying terror. And as I stood there alone and shaking in the dark, the whistling started again. The same 4 notes, from the woods. Perfect. Patient. It was my turn. You don't have time for grief. Not when you're looking at the broken bodies of your best friends and realize you're next. The sorrow was a physical wave, but the terror was a tidal wave that followed, washing everything else away. The logic was cold, brutal, and inescapable. The game was the only reality now. The rules were the only laws that mattered. My consciousness narrowed, my entire being stripped down to a single desperate function. I am not a person anymore. I am a statue. My only purpose is to reach the Whistler. The grief, the guilt, the memories. They were luxuries I couldn't afford. They were baggage that would get me killed. My inner world was wiped clean, replaced by the stark, simple architecture of the game. I took a steadying breath, my eyes fixed on the darkness. The whistling began. I moved. My movements were no longer human. They were mechanical, a puppet's response to the strings of the whistle. Move. Freeze. Move. Freeze. Every nerve ending was a live wire, every shadow a potential threat. On the third whistle, my foot caught on a thick, exposed root. I went down. Time seemed to warp, stretching the moment of my fall into an eternity. I saw the ground rushing up, felt the searing, white-hot pain as my ankle twisted beneath me, and heard the whistle cut off mid-note. I froze. My body was a contorted wreck of agony, my face inches from the dirt, every muscle screaming. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, anything to choke back the cry of pain that I knew would be a death sentence. The silence stretched, the unseen entity judging me. I lay there, a statue of pure agony, and waited. The whistle started again. The game wasn't over. I had to move. The pain in my ankle was a physical, roaring presence, a fire consuming my leg. But the image of Annie's broken form was a more powerful fire in my mind. I couldn't run. I couldn't even stand. I began to crawl. Dragging my useless leg behind me, I lurched through the dirt and leaves, a broken animal. Each movement was a deliberate, agonizing selection. Push with my good leg, pull with my arms, freeze. The world had shrunk to this small, desperate reality. The sound of the whistle, the smell of the damp earth, and the blinding, nauseating pain. My entire consciousness was focused on this singular, desperate task. The fire pit, the bodies, the camp itself. It all faded away. There was only the game. After what felt like a lifetime of crawling, I realized the sound wasn't coming from the fire pit anymore. It never was. It was coming from deeper in the darkness, from a spot near a huge gnarled oak tree that marked the edge of the clearing. My goal had never been Max. It had been this thing. As I got closer, my eyes, now accustomed to the gloom, could just make out a shape, a column of shadow that was somehow darker than the night around it, a void in the shape of a man, the Whistler, the host. My final assumption was that if I could just touch it, the game would end. I coiled my muscles, ignoring the scream from my ankle. One last push. It was all I had left. The whistle began its 4-note loop. I lunged. With the last ounce of my strength, I threw myself forward, my hand outstretched, my fingers reaching for the shadow. I felt a jolt as my hand made contact, not with flesh, but with the rough, solid bark of the tree. And in that instant, the whistling stopped, not just paused. It was gone. A complete, total, and profound silence descended. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, my body braced for the sickening snap of my own bones. I waited. Nothing happened. Slowly, trembling, I opened my eyes. My hand was pressed flat against the oak tree. I was alone. The fire was a pile of dying embers. The bodies of Max and Annie were gone. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of the horror that had just unfolded. I had survived. I had won. But as I stood there, leaning against the tree, in the dead quiet, a new, colder terror washed over me. You don't win a game like this and just walk away. The winner has to take the loser's place, by surviving, by finishing the game. You already are the next Whistler. The story is over, but the game isn't. You made an assumption when you started watching that you were just an observer, but you listened to the end. You learned the tune. So, listen closely to the silence when this is over. That faint 4-note melody you can suddenly hear in the back of your mind. Are you sure it's just your imagination? This story woke something up inside you. It was supposed to. Subscribe, and in the next video we'll teach you the rest of the rules. It's your turn to play.